This series was made possible thanks to the generosity of these patrons and from the likes and watch time of viewers like you. Thank you for the support.
Read the disclaimers, and please use common sense.
Around 12 months ago, I produced some of my least favorite videos I've ever made. My top 12 worst Transformers of 2020, and my top 20 best Transformers of 2020. And the reason I don't like these videos, apart from some negative feedback that I won't get into, is quite simply, I don't feel like I was being very true to myself in those videos. By which I mean, I feel as though I made those videos with the intention of impressing my friends and making them think that I was cool and I had great taste in Transformers. However, because I got so caught up in trying to impress the community and fit in with everyone else, I feel as though I missed a few figures that I genuinely enjoyed more than others. Like, if I were to redo those lists, Alternate Universe Optimus Prime would be straight out not on the list. I do not like Earthrise Optimus Prime. It's a decent mold objectively, but for me on a personal level, it just doesn't do anything. And same goes for some of the other figures, like Earthrise Smokescreen. That would be another one I'd take off. And I think you get the idea at this point. If my audience, and more importantly my friends, really do see me as a friend and someone that they like watching, then really, they aren't gonna care about what I think is the best and worst of 2021. And so, with that being said, salutations, denizens of the internet! I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of the top 22 Transformers of 2021. Why 22? Because I like to go one step beyond!
Okay, so before we move on to the bulk of this list, I should cover 4 ground rules that are very important to this list. First and foremost, my opinion reigns supreme. If you don't like the choices I made for this list, I'm sorry, but this is my list and I have the freedom to make those choices. Rule number 2, if I don't have the ability to make or reuse footage of a figure, it's not going on the list. Mostly because people seem to be allergic to the sight of my face outside of the intros and outros to these videos. Rule number 3, the only other qualifier for the list is that I had to have had acquired them during 2021 at some point. No years earlier than 2021, no years later than 2021. Which means that despite the fact that the first few weeks of 2022 have given me some pretty baller figures, with one notable exception, that means I can't talk about them in any greater detail until I either do my review of them, or I talk about them at the end of the year list for 2022. And the 4th rule, breakages. If I liked a figure and it broke, then I have to disqualify it from the running of this list. Best the figure can hope for is that I'll get another copy of it during 2022 and then it can be considered for this year's list. Or at worst, I'll just give it an honorable mention and never acknowledge it again. Which means that you won't get to see Optimus Primal from the Kingdom line or Airazor from the Kingdom line, as both of those figures broke. They are still honorable mentions though, since I really did like them. And before we get started properly with this video, an F in the chat, as long as you're attending the premiere of this video, or the comments section for my SS86 Wreckgar. You see here, my frequent house pest and slightly less frequent guest star on It Figures, the hoodie guy, organized my collection while he was home for winter break. While he was organizing my shelves, he placed Wreckgar very close to the edge of the topmost shelf, most likely unaware of the figure's total lack of heel supports. And so when I moved my chair back towards the shelves, it bumped into the shelves, and unfortunately Wreckgar tumbled off. And this sheared the mushroom peg that was holding the hip into the waist clean off, and I could not for the life of me find a way to reattach it. Now, even in spite of the hoodie guy's antagonistic relationship to me, I don't think that there's any one person who's to blame for this incident. If anything's to blame, it's gravity. Now let's just get on with the list before I break down into tears. Starting off our countdown, we have GDO CLiffjumper, a figure that I honestly never thought I'd get. This is a retool, or as Hasbro likes to put it, a partial of Prime First Edition CLiffjumper, which is an excellent figure. The only difference between this and the original First Edition CLiffjumper is the head, and besides that, it's all the same. Same amazingly bulky character silhouette, same incredibly clean hand-swapping gun gimmick, and literally the same transformation. Honestly, the first edition molds are legendary for how hard they are to get, and considering how blown away I am with this mold alone, I think that reputation is well deserved. They deserve to be sought after, and I'm genuinely quite surprised that I only got this for $8 at the local collector store. Guess that's just the perk of shopping local. Now for many collectors, this figure is the holiest of grails. It was never repainted, it was never retooled, heck, BotCon never even released a version of this mold. And while I don't feel as though it's lived up to all of the hype surrounding it, this is still a pretty good figure. It has multiple cursed Gigawatt modes, a surprising amount of Siege Blast Effect compatibility, a fantastic transformation, some amazing paint applications, more 3mm clips than you have any right to shake a stick at, and a built-in Phantom Blood reference. I honestly feel as though this is one of the best figures to have ever come out of the 2010s, but because I traded this for a Kingdom Optimus Primal, I feel as though I kinda stole it, so as an apology, please go and subscribe to Stop Motion Reviewers channel. You know, it's weird. We've been getting a lot of really good interpretations of the Tetrajet lately, and the Rust here is honestly no exception to that. Now, I will admit I do have a bit of a soft spot for the color green, but in this case, I genuinely feel as though this is an amazing figure. You'll remember that last year I chose as my #1 pick Blitzwing from the Studio Series line, and while I still stand by that decision because of the emotional impact it had on me, I have to say it, this is way better. For all the emotional importance he had to me individually, I can't say that he wasn't without annoying quirks. More specifically, the backpack and how it loved to untap at a moment's notice. And that's not to say that Thrust himself is without foibles, in particular how the arm cannon seems to be designed to attach in such a way that it gives him the approximate aiming capacity of a stormtrooper. But on the whole, I think that this is yet another great Tetrajet Seeker to add to the lineup. A lineup that may even be expanding more this year. Also, the fact that I totally love green, it's my second favorite color after red. Probably one of my most surprising picks, I chose Power Core Combiner's Smolder, because, well, I really like him. The concept of a Decepticon fire truck is very unique, and honestly, I'd like to see it done more often, especially since Decepticons are meant to be deceptive. They should try and trick people into a false sense of security. And he also kinda looks like he'd be friends with Dead End. And while he does sport a very weak torso mode, and also a pretty crummy minicon partner in Chopster, I can't claim that I regret my choice. This past year, I wanted to do a very special episode called The Genesis of Generations, where I would pay tribute to the very start of the Generations line, the Classics line. An idea that I unfortunately never got to materialize, mostly because of school. Though, fun fact, I had initially planned on that being episode 99. And as a semi-intentional side effect, that meant I had to pick up most of the Classics line. And while I don't feel as though every part of that line has aged gracefully, CLiffjumper, and by extension the Bumblebee mold, have aged like fine wine. I mean, for crying out loud, this figure packed along a jet ski and seats, both of which are too small for even, well, Titan Masters to fit inside. I mean, I almost feel bad and I kinda wanna ask him to stop trying so hard to get me to like him because I already like him, but he's trying so hard anyways. I gotta respect that. So, Scourge here is the first time I've ever had a figure of Black Convoy, or as he's more commonly known, Nemesis Prime. And I honestly don't feel as though I was being fair enough to him in his review. He's an excellent figure. Though he still works best when he has his trailer on hand, I will say that much. With a fantastic robot mode, fabulous colors, a fairly baller trailer, and also the addition of the repo labels, thank you Dr. Lockdown, this figure is proof that some things just get better with time. And also my perception of some things get better with time. So, Kingdom Warpath. You know, I genuinely don't have a lot to say about it here, mostly because, well, to be perfectly blunt, I think I got it all out of my system back when I did the review of this figure, so, if you wouldn't mind, just go check out that video so you can see why I love this figure. I could say that about every entry on this list, but quite frankly, this is genuinely good, and I don't have the energy to come up with like a long list of reasons in an entry, so go watch the video, I guess. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of Jazz, mostly because I find characters who are just quote-unquote cool to be exceptionally boring. But when we add in the quirky flair of the animated line, now we're getting somewhere. This figure honestly does a lot for me that many other Transformers of its era don't do, like have somewhat functioning hip swivels, but it also comes down to how good the proportions are and how on model it feels to the actual cartoon. Not to mention, his really cool shades are also light piped, and they work really good, which is refreshing considering that the other Jazz I got this year doesn't have very good light piping in its shades. Okay, so like I said, this was the year I really started to dive into the Bayverse extra characters, so to speak. And Tomahawk, I think, was one of my first, but also one of my favorites, mostly for the fact that he's got an extremely unique transformation for a helicopter former. While the articulation does leave me a little lukewarm, the gimmicks and also just the overall unique silhouette of this figure leave me a little bit starstruck, to be perfectly honest. He's honestly just a really nice, standard, generic, rank-filling Autobot, and there's nothing wrong with that. Waspinator has always been one of my all-time favorite Beast Wars characters, mostly because I can really relate to how life always seems to be shitting on him. However, thanks to my friend Kelvin Ghost, I can't really see this as being an actual wasp. He said that the figure looks a bit more ant-like in beast mode, which is a sentiment that I can genuinely agree with. So there may be a chance that they may upscale and retool this into Inferno, but please don't quote me on that. Regardless whether or not this does end up being an Inferno retool, I am confident in saying that this figure on its own merits is excellent. I don't really feel as though I should be all that impressed with this figure. It's just a repaint of a Beast Machine's, well, Basics class Viacon. And yet, in spite of all of this, the figure genuinely managed to blow me away. Mostly because, well, he's so small, and yet he still has a bunch of gimmicks, none of which feel like they are detriments to the figure. Also, the color scheme of blue and white and yellow in general feels so heroic and classy. I genuinely just love it. Not to mention the untapped comedic potential of the mouth in his torso. That's something. Transformers Prime is a series that I hold near and dear to my heart, even though most of it just evolves into MacGuffin hunting. Not to mention that its depiction of Soundwave was, well, for lack of a better term, creepy. And this figure honestly does an excellent job of capturing the, well, scary, spindly silhouette of Soundwave. So try saying that 5 times fast. Not to mention that he comes with a laser beak and it is genuinely quite adorable to me for some reason. Not to mention he has so many joints. It's insane that a figure this old is so poseable to me, still, somehow. As I stated earlier in this video, I disqualified Kingdom Airraiser from this list because she broke on me. However, that doesn't mean that her mold didn't end up making it onto the list. Kingdom Skywarp feels like an upgrade in every possible way, especially in terms of the color breakup. Not to mention that this brown feels luscious, the dark brown that is, it borders almost on mahogany colored. Not to mention that as a bald eagle, this version of the mold feels oddly patriotic. You know, I'm glad that I'm not the only one who felt as though Cyclonus getting snubbed at the Best of 2021 awards at Hasbro PulseCon was extremely sus. My theory has been that Tigatron was doing poorly on the pre-order front, mostly because it was basically an upscaled version of Cheetor, which everyone had at this point. And pardon me for saying this, but I feel as though the Cheetor mold is very comparable to the Siege Sideswipe mold, in that I personally, and many others, find it to be painfully average. That is to say, both of those molds are fine, they're perfectly adequate, but they aren't anything special. Cyclonus, on the other hand, is something that is immeasurably special. Cartoon accurate enough to please even the most unsatisfiable G1ers, detailed enough to make Chug and Classic Masterpiece fans happy, and most of all, just an all-around fantastic figure. Now, originally, I was going to make this my #1 pick just because I felt as though I had a personal obligation to fulfill, since, well, Hasbro is clearly lying to us. But unfortunately, that fiery passion that made me want to get, I guess you could say, vengeance on Hasbro for disrespecting Cyclonus has kinda burned me out to the figure. And while that is unfortunate, I won't deny the fact that this is by far the, well, from an objective standpoint, the best figure on the list, and the one that I would most highly recommend to anyone. Okay, this is another one where I'm feeling a little burnt out on him, but that's not because I feel he was snubbed at Hasbro PulseCon. That's just because, well, I've been wanting to do a review of this for months, and I just haven't been able to eke it out of me. Origins Bumblebee is an amazing figure, and it does a lot right. Despite being the same size as Earthrise Cliffjumper, this figure packs in a more satisfying transformation and way more parts than Earthrise Cliffjumper. It's just as enjoyable as figures that cost 50% more. And the robot mode is also great. Despite the fact that it doesn't have any wrist swivels, I can't really see that there's any issues that I have with the figure itself. Operative words there being the figure itself. But despite how badly the accessories fumbled it, I'd be a fool to say that I would not recommend this figure to anyone at all. If you see this at Target or wherever it's being sold, get a copy. Not too bad for a figure with an alt mode that kinda looks like an order of McDonald's hash browns. Okay, so before I got this figure, I didn't really get Galvatron. I didn't understand his appeal, I didn't know why people liked him, I just thought he was kinda goofy and weird. And despite how strange I find this alt mode to be, I'm not gonna lie to you, this figure finally made it all make sense to me. I guess for lack of a better term, I just stopped caring about the practicality of it and just let myself go along for the ride, and I'm glad I did, because oh boy, what a ride this figure is! With excellent articulation, a very good-looking if completely stupid in concept vehicle mode, and of course, the Matrix of Leader Drips makes for one sublime package. Would you believe me if I said that I bought this figure by accident? You may remember that last year I got a very excellent deal on RID 2001 Galvatron from an eBay seller. Well, guess what? During that same year, I also got a really good deal on New Classics Optimus Prime, but I was just bidding so I could up the amount of money that the guy was making off of them. So, surprise, surprise, I win the auction, and I get the figure in the early days of 2021, and oh boy, what a choice figure this is. It looks powerful and heroic, and I think my favorite part of all of this figure is the fact that while it doesn't have a lot of joints, it's put them where it counts. And I feel no shame in telling you all that I think that, in terms of my collection, this is my definitive Optimus Prime figure. I told myself so many times that I wasn't gonna get this figure, and it took until the figure was basically 50% off for me to actually go and buy it. But having said that, I can't say that I'm mad that I eventually caved in and did it. Kingdom Rodimus feels like a genuine evolution of SS86 Hot Rod in terms of toy designs. It has basically the same structure as SS86 Hot Rod, but casts off everything that did not work about that mold. And this ironically makes it feel more like a genuine evolution of Hot Rod than the actual evolution Hot Rod / Rodimus Prime mold, or should I say, Rodimus mold. There are many Transformers that came before my time in the fandom that I have heard legends of. They are super sought after and also well regarded by old fans and new fans alike. And one of these figures happens to be Hunt for the Decepticons Terradive. This thing is the real deal, with an amazing alternate mode, and what I'm sure is the brightest shade of orange you are legally allowed to have on a consumer product. I am confident in saying that Terradive lived up to the legends I had heard, and surpassed them beyond my wildest expectations. Not a single part of this figure ends up where you think it's supposed to go, with the primary wings ending up on the legs of all places, 2 of the pairs of side wings forming chest plates, and also the tail fins forming into these wicked little back wings that look so cool and lend him this cool little edgy badass aesthetic. I can guarantee you that if this was a character in an actual Transformers show, he'd be an honorable warrior of some kind, and he'd end up betraying the Decepticons at some point because of his code of honor. I don't know. I just want to see him in a show, okay? This guy looks awesome. Oh, and how could I dare forget to mention this Trident spear weapon. It is so cool. It has this little automorph trick. When you push up the Trident point, it'll like lock into place to form a spear, and then like when you push it down again, it folds out into the Trident, and that is just so simple, but it is so cool. And it honestly helps to add to this figure and how awesome it is. I genuinely do not regret paying like around $22 for this thing. It is amazing. You know, for years, Cyberverse completely fooled me into thinking that it was incapable of making great figures. Everything that I tried to dip my toes into just seemed like more and more gimmick-laden trash meant to clog up the clearance aisles at Walmart and Target. But this year, the Cyberverse line proved me wrong. While perhaps not the most elegant Triceratops on the market, this figure was a load of fun. I only have 2 complaints to relay about this figure. First off, the materials ain't really it, Chief. They aren't exactly what I'd call the most high-quality plastic. And the second, and far lesser complaint about this figure, is just the fact that it doesn't have any bicep swivels. Apart from that, most excellent. Studio Series 86 Grimlock is a figure that I've always found unintentionally hilarious, and it's for good reason. Just look at this guy. Heckin' chonker, am I right? But more importantly than its size is both the level of detail present on here, which is downright impressive, and the endlessly addictive transformation. Now, up until this point, I had had a lot of trouble finding an SS86 figure that I wanted to transform, mostly because they can be so complex and unintuitive that I just end up dreading the process of transforming them. But Grimlock was the first figure where that was anything but the case. And apart from Wheelie, oh god Wheelie, he is a fantastic figure, but not my favorite. Okay, so I had a ton of figures that were honorable mentions, and, well, because I didn't really want to leave any of them out, I've decided that instead of providing commentary on each of the individual robots, I'm just going to present them as a slideshow, if that's okay. It's still going to be around 2.5 minutes, though. And like that, we are done with the honorable mentions. And now all that's left is for me to introduce my number one pick. And so, without any further ado, I present... Okay, so this entry is based mostly on how long this figure's managed to stick with me, and so it is with great honor that I present to you the number one pick of this list. Transformers Crossovers Gigawatt. I think the reason that I'm so enamored with this figure is because I don't really like the mold that it's based on. I think that the original Sideswipe mold from the Siege line is painfully average, like I stated earlier. That is, it does a lot good, but it doesn't do enough good to be exceptional, and it doesn't do enough bad for it to be deplorable. So it's kind of in this boring middle ground that's difficult to talk about. However, what I ultimately think sets this apart from every other single version of the mold is one simple fact: the attention to detail and the authenticity of this vehicle mode. Oh shit, I guess that's two things. Now, I am not afraid to admit that I am not a big fan of Back to the Future. In fact, at the time of this recording, I haven't even seen any of the movies. But because this car is so interesting and so cool, and the fact that I've actually seen the DeLorean in person, all of these little tiny details that the designers picked out just come across as so impressive. And they're so authentic, and they're just so cool. Not to mention that the plastic also kind of feels as though it's been textured to some degree. It looks as though it's got like a wood texture to it, and I can feel the texture, and it feels very nice. And really, that's another bit of the detail that I appreciate. Then we get to robot mode, where the flux capacitor, one of the most iconic parts of the DeLorean, becomes a recurring motif of the figure. It's both in his chest plate and on his boots, and it's that attention to detail that has truly held my attention for the past 3 months that I've owned this. And there you have it. There is the reason why Gigawatt is my number one favorite Transformer of 2021.
So, overall, 2021 was a terrible year, but an important year for me. Much like 2020, it was a year where I grew in terms of my mental health and awareness of my ADHD and how it worked. And I think that those lessons are the things that are most important about a year. The things that you learn for yourself. Of course, this doesn't change the fact that 2021 sucked and we lost a lot of great people, including one of my personal heroes from the Transformers community, Derek J. Wyatt, the guy who literally made animated the powerhouse that it was. And I just don't want to keep that running up for a third year in a row. So what do you say, guys? You with me to break this curse of crappy years? And while I've got you here, please do me a small favor and like this video, and also share it with your friends and comment down below, you know, drive algorithm and all that stuff. And if you really like these videos and want to see more of them, please subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. And if you feel so inclined to and have the ability to, please consider supporting me on Patreon and on Ko-fi and on my Teespring merch store. So, yeah, with all that being said, this is Firebite27 over and out, and let's make 2022 great!